Okay, let's try this again. Hey, you guys, I apologize for the delay.
Hey,
Awesome.
can you hear me well now?
Perfect. Absolutely
Awesome.
perfect. Okay,
Awesome.
so basically, for everyone who is watching or will be watching over the weekend, um, this is my show called Hopefully Spreading Wisdom. So we make no promises to spread wisdom, but we are hopeful to spread the wisdom.
Yeah.
And before we get into the continuation of uh, the last I mean, basically last, I don't want to say last week, but a continuation
Mm.
of the last show that I did. I'm interviewing a friend of mine, Baruch Bergman, who is sharing with us his story of I guess the road to recovery
Yeah.
from sexual abuse that took place in the yeshiva system, the trauma of that, the aftermath of the drug use that would otherwise never have happened, and the road to healing, basically, which is a very difficult role. I'm going to start
Mm.
today's segment with a quote from the Empty Chair: "Finding hope and joy, timeless wisdom," from a Hasidic master, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. When you feel yourself getting angry, stop. Imagine yourself as having already exploded, and you now feel wasted. That's what happens when you get angry. Your soul leaves you. Do this, and your anger is sure to resolve. Answer insult with silence. When someone hurts you, do not answer in kind. You will then be worthy of genuine honor. Honor that is inner honor, honor from above. And the hope of this show is to obviously merit honor from above. So we're not
Yeah.
going to get angry. We're just going to talk about it and provide solutions. So
Mm.
in the episode we did the last time, we talked about the abuse itself, the age that it started. So just to recap quickly, this started at 10. And at what age did this stop?
15.
15. Okay, so this was happening at the school on a regular basis between 10 and 15.
Yes.
Okay,
I mean, a lot of it wasn't at school. A lot of it, took place in other people's homes that would, lure me in. But yeah, for the most part.
okay. Now, question for you.
Hmm.
If there was ever a time where these people would be held accountable, and let's
Right.
say that there would be um, evidence provided that there would, in some form or another, where there's just no way you could be being dishonest. Would any of these people ever dare have the gall to say that any of these relationships were consensual?
Yeah, probably.
What?
I would imagine so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, because that's, I feel like, something that, you know, we've
Yeah.
seen a little bit. Like,
Either it was either consensual or it never happened.
right, it was either consensual or it never happened.
Yeah.
So bring us to the time you're 15. All of these things have just happened. What do you do
Uh-huh.
now? It's over. You're able to leave. You're not, the trauma, let's say, is over. What do you what do you do now? And tell us about that piece of time from
Uh-huh.
when the drug use actually started.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, at that point, what goes through, well, I want to say human being, but I'm going to say my mind
Hmm.
is, A, B, and C happened. Um, what do I do about it now? What do
Right.
I, I mean, the healing part obviously did not start because I was definitely not ready because it had just happened,
Mm-hmm.
and I had just gotten the courage to stand up for myself and finally um, walk away from it and not let it happen again. But
Was
at
there an
that point,
isolated incident where you maybe stood in and said, "Listen, you're not going to do this anymore"? Did anything like that ever take place?
um, well, I didn't say it to anyone. I just decided at that point that I'm going to walk away um, from any possibility of it happening again, and from any person that would do something like that. So I decided to remove myself completely at that point from people that were religious because up to that point, anyone that I knew that was would take advantage. So at that point, I decided that I'm going to cut off any ties with a person that's like that
Okay.
because not that every person is like that, but for me at that point, every person was like that, so I
Right.
had to
No.
put a distance.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Um, so what, from the time when the abuse stopped, from the time that you decided to start self-medicating with drugs,
Mm.
what was that span of time like?
So I mean, I had started already, with like alcohol and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
probably when I was like 12 or 13. Um,
So
but
during the cycle, you basically started self-medicating with alcohol.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Um, and by the time I reached the age of 15, it started becoming more of just, something that I did for fun. I realized at that point that self-medicating was something that I needed in
Mm-hmm.
order to live with myself, in order to live with what was going on in my mind, and in
Right.
order to live with the memories and everything like that.
Right.
Um, so at that point, I realized that this is something that I need is to self-medicate. So I think that's the point where I started my search for the right feeling, the right drug, the right
Okay.
um, and that kind of um, escalated from, I wanted a party, let's say, so from party drugs to sedatives, that, because I went through that kind of year or two where self-medicating for me was happiness. Self-medicating for me was to have fun.
Okay,
Um,
so you were like going out and partying and doing these things. It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
like you're at home in the basement
no,
with a fifth of Jack and a bag of
right.
Coke. Okay.
But after a little while, I realized that being alone in my room with the bottle of Jack was the answer. Um,
Okay.
so I went from going out and doing all these things to being alone in my room and just trying to medicate in any way possible. Um, and that slowly led to the introduction of more and more drugs and different drugs and heavier drugs
Right.
and I mean eventually pretty much eventually through the years it just pretty much got worse and worse, pretty much.
So at what age did you discover that alcohol maybe wasn't the answer, marijuana wasn't the answer, um, that maybe heroin would be? Like, did it start as
Um,
pills?
about I realized that about when I was like 18. Um, it just kind of went to, kind of from alcohol. At one point I was very into alcohol and benzos, like alcohol and Xanax together at the same time,
Okay.
because that sent me into complete like just oblivion. Because I once I did that, I couldn't function, which was what I liked. I liked to not
Right.
be able to function. I liked to not be alive in a sense.
Right.
So when I found that, I was really excited that I found that, and I took advantage of it. I took advantage of that feeling,
Now,
And
question,
it would,
were you prescribed the Xanax?
no,
So, okay, so
no.
were you prescribed any medication by a doctor at that point or a
I mean,
psychiatrist?
they may have prescribed me, you know, anti-anxiety or antidepressants, but I mean, at the end of the day, those don't really, I mean, they work, but they only work if you're like working on yourself, you know, because
Gotcha.
meds are only 25% of the cure. You know, the rest of the
Right,
75% has to come um, from your own work in life.
right,
And I was at no point in my life to do that at all.
right.
Um, so that became, you know, that became my thing. That became my escape. And, you know, that just kind of led to, you know, being in the hospital, you know, overdosing and you know, almost dying because, I mean, yeah, the fact is that Xanax and alcohol is a deadly
It's a
combination.
dangerous combination,
Yeah.
definitely, for sure.
Um, so that was the first point when I realized that, you know, I need help. Like, you know, this is gonna kill me and I'm gonna die very soon. Um, so that was the first time that I seek treatment was when I was 18.
Okay. And at that point, had you started with heroin abuse at that point, or it hadn't
No,
gotten?
at that point, I had only I had gone to the doctor, so you know he prescribed me some opiates, some you know Percocets and stuff, but I wasn't very into it. You know, at that point, my thing was Xanax and alcohol.
Okay.
Um, but you know, I went to treatment for a couple months, and I mean, you know, I did treatment. You know, I did the right, you know, go through treatment and all that, but
Right.
I don't think I was ready at that point. You know, I wanted help, but I didn't want to give it up. So after that treatment was when you know, I discovered opiates, and
Okay.
that's when the real issues started.
So that was when it was taken basically to the next level.
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, was it like, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I
Mm.
understand, um, it usually starts out with Percocet,
Yeah.
oxycodone, things like that,
Yeah.
Vicodin.
The way it started was that the doctor prescribed me Percocets,
If
and
you don't mind my asking, what for?
I had like some injury because I was high and I banged my knee or something, and you know,
Hmm.
it was a bad, like I tore something, and so he gave me Percocets for that, and that, um, you know, once I ran out of that, you know, I sought it out on the street, and that escalated from that to oxys, and then to you know, smoking blues and stuff like that, and then
What is
eventually,
smoking blues, if you don't mind my asking?
well, you take a 30 milligram and you put it on foil and you freebase it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, once that came into play, um, you know, it's expensive to buy those.
I would
Um,
imagine.
so, I mean, I've heard this from a lot of people where this is really what happens is that they become too expensive, and at the end of the day, heroin's a lot cheaper.
Right.
So that's pretty much, you know, I was broke, and someone's like, "Oh, why don't you try this?" And that's pretty much what happened. You know, and
Okay.
from there on, it was you know, strictly, I wouldn't touch anything else except for that.
So, what was going on inside of your mind where you were like, I can't cope with this to the point that like I need to be heavily medicated?
Right.
Like, was it panic
Um,
attacks? Was it nightmares? Was it what
so,
goes on that leads somebody to
so, yeah. So, I mean, I would say starting from about 17, I started having really bad anxiety. You know, panic attacks, staying in my room all day, you know, not being able to leave. And I believe a lot of it was due to not feeling like I was in control of my own mind and my own body because because all this abuse had happened, and what happens when you get abused is it's almost like, even though the abuse is over, it's almost like someone's still there controlling your mind. It's almost like a split personality disorder. You know what I mean? It's almost like schizophrenia, where there's this voice of another human being just in constant control. And
Mhm.
you can't you can't do your own wants and what you want to do, because there's so much control and there's so much chaos going on inside of your head from all these people, and the things they say, and the things that they've done, that it puts this belief system in you that you deserve bad, because at the end of the day, for me, it was like, what I was thinking is that if I want someone to care about me, if I want someone to be there for me, I got to drop my pants. And that was,
My
you know
ex-husband said the same thing
yeah,
verbatim.
yeah,
Verbatim. He said the same thing verbatim.
yeah, because it's like, it's almost like this is what you got to do. um that this is what's going to do it. If you want people to be there for you, then that's what you got to do,
Right,
because look at what happened. You know what I mean?
right,
And for me, it wasn't just look at what happened. For me, it was like, look at all these years.
right,
It's almost like, when you grow up having something ingrained in your mind for so long, it becomes your reality.
right.
It's not even a question of, is this real or not? It's just your reality, because you're so used to that thought, or that so it becomes who you are. So at that point, I didn't care what I did. I didn't care what it did to me. I didn't care what would happen. All I knew is that I wanted to be away from this. I just
Right.
wanted to not feel that. I didn't want to wake up in the middle of the night screaming from night terrors because I'm thinking that it's happening again. So I mean, at that point, to me, it didn't make a difference of the dangers. You know what I mean? It doesn't make a difference to me, what the result could be, or death, or overdose, or whatever, because I mean, I didn't care, because all I knew is that I couldn't live with this.
Now,
So even if I die, at least I'm not living with this.
right.
Yeah.
Um, and were these episodes, I mean, I am, as I've shared on this show, the other show I did, my
Hmm.
stand-up, there, like, there's been a large amount of people after they
Hmm.
go through some level of sexual trauma. It's usually more than one isolated event
Yeah.
that have had some interesting claims, to say the least, of just like what you just like what you spoke about, like a
Yeah.
voice inside of their head. And now some of the other people that I've spoken to have made like paranormal claims. Now, and something I've shared with you, everybody who knows me knows I am, for some reason, psychically gifted. It's been that way since I remember my first
Hmm.
memory. I would see things before they would happen. And when I was little, I thought the bad things that were happening, I thought I was responsible for, because I
Hmm.
would ask people to help or to step in and they wouldn't. In fact, when one of my dearest friends, I would go to her house and have these overwhelming sick feelings that she was being sexually assaulted, and I would see things in my head that
Hmm.
I thought were happening to her, and nobody wanted to touch it with a 90-foot pole. Okay, so fast forward to 2017, I think it was, when the Me Too movement came out. She wrote a Megillah. She wrote a Megillah about the shit that happened. The shit
Yeah.
that I saw in my noggin, my imagination. Turns out I was right. And do you now? There's been studies that something about the trauma something that allows people to be extra sensitive in that regard. Do you
Yeah.
think that it is an issue for yourself, an issue of your mind becoming gifted because we know that it changes the brain chemistry?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think that it is a change of the mind that could make someone schizophrenic? And I have walked through the fires of mental health. Like I've
Yeah.
been honest about it. I've seen every specialist because you have to rule out psychotic episodes.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, thank God I was able to get that clearance, but it was the massive amount of work that got me there. Do you think that there is even a possibility that this, for maybe yourself, could have been
Mm-hmm.
an outside energy? Or do you think that this was, like, let's say, a schizophrenic episode?
Um,
And
well,
people
I
can have
mean,
schizophrenic episodes, by the way, even if they're not schizophrenic. There's schizoid personality disorders. We're not here to talk about that today.
mhm.
If you guys are interested, Google it. But it's it's not just a spectrum like it used to be.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think that,
I mean, it's
obviously,
not a one spectrum like it used. Now there's a
right.
spectrum, whereas before it was just schizophrenia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I honestly think that I've seen people um, whom I'm very close with, and I've seen um, you know, them have actually schizophrenia, and speaking to them, a large portion of those people went through sexual abuse actually. Um, but I mean, I think that it can go both ways. Um,
Okay.
for me personally, after it happened, I think what it gave me, in terms of like what I see, um, I think it gave me the ability to see pain,
Mm-hmm.
to, to look at someone in the eye and kind of see the pain that they're going through or went through. Um, and I'm not always right, you know what I mean? I'm not always
None of us
like,
are.
because, but I'm not a psychic or anything, but I but like I can go over to someone and have a conversation, and a lot of times I'll do that where we'll be having a conversation, and I'll look at them and I'll say like, what's your pain? You know what I mean? What's your baggage? Because for some reason, like, I don't know, for some reason I always see it. I can see it in someone when they walk. I can see that they're carrying a lot of grief and pain. And when I see it, I can feel it. So that's
Were you
something for
like
me.
this? Were you like this prior to the?
No, no,
No,
no, definitely not.
definitely.
I think it, what you were saying before, like, did it make you extra sensitive? I think that made me really sensitive um, to what other people are going through.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, I guess in a way, it's also a relief to me to either speak to someone that's went through something like that, or just see that someone else has the pain that I have. Not saying that it's any more pain than anything else, but just regarding the same issue,
Mhm.
regarding the same, it doesn't necessarily need to be sexual abuse or something like that, but just something to a degree of pain that I can feel and I can see in another person. So, um, again, I'm not always right, um, but
By the way, not even Nevi'im were
yeah,
always right, and that's something that
exactly.
I think that needs to be for sure acknowledged. But
Yeah.
there's when you see these things, especially if they're bad,
Hmm.
pray that they don't happen. And if they don't,
Yeah.
why are we to assume that we didn't have a part and maybe by miraculous prayer overturning a judgment. How do we
Yeah.
know that? Especially, it says in Proverbs, Hashem is close to the brokenhearted.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like when someone's, not feeling well, or someone's, on the brink of death, it's like, oh, just leave them alone because maybe that's what God wants.
Never.
But at the end of the day, you need to put in the action,
Right,
like you can't just sit at home and lay in bed and say, oh, I have faith. There's actions, that need to be taken in life to
right.
to work through things. Yeah.
Well, we are approaching 2:30, and
Okay.
because of the fact that Shabbat is coming in for all of us, and I have to
Hmm.
pick up my children from school, I've got to try to, be as responsible as I possibly can with all that
Hmm.
adulting.
Yeah.
We're going to reconvene. Hopefully, are you available Motzei Shabbos, or are you available Sunday night to pick this
I'm
up?
I'm leaving to Israel on Monday. I'm
Okay.
not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, if you message me, I'll let you know what my schedule
Okay.
is.
Okie dokie.
But
Um,
yeah, I mean, I think.
are you going to Israel for Pesach?
Hmm.
You're so
Yeah.
lucky. It's so nice.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
I think it's important. Um, I think it's important for people to understand, um, that your pain and someone else's pain might be different. Your story and someone else's story might be different. I don't think there's, you know, a level of pain and misery because you only know misery as much as you know misery. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to be sensitive about other people's pain, and I guess with the whole, when they did on Facebook, me too, me too, me too, I think it's important to remember that people actually have stories. People actually have lived through this, and people have actually, um, gone through that pain. And sometimes that pain requires self-medication, because it's like, being dead alive, until you can work through it. So I just think it's important for people to remember that, you shouldn't judge when someone's going through something like that because you never know. Because you never know what's behind it. You never know
I
what
mean,
the problem, the solution is.
you're spot on, and we'll close out on that note. I mean, I, as I've been very open, was raised by and then married to a victim of incest, and that had taken place over the course of several years. And
Hmm.
that when those feelings go ignored or they're dismissed, what I think is important for people to realize is that puts them in a position of possible re-victimization where even if they're never,
Yeah.
my mother never molested anybody. My mother never raised an inappropriate sexual hand to any. She 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 could not I
You're
don't know
you're
if we're
breaking
having,
up.
okay.
We're having some issues.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, but you're
Okay.
you're frozen.
You're okay, hold on. Okay, how about
Oh,
now?
there you go. There you go. There you go.
Okay. So my mother could never hear about a struggle, trauma, drama, bullshit, problem, legitimate or otherwise, in my
Hmm.
ex-husband either, because in their minds, it was no comparison to what they had experienced. And I think that's also the point is it's not a competition. It's not who had it worse. It's
Yeah.
how do we
Not
now
at all. Yeah.
have these problems, you while
Yeah.
we're here, and how do we hopefully create a solution where these problems just simply don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Anyways,
And it's not, it's funny because a lot of people think it's like, it's like, oh, he or she, he'll get over it. She'll get over it. So sometimes it's not as simple as getting over it. You know. So I think that's important
No,
too.
it definitely isn't. And we're going to stop. Wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. And if we don't get to do another piece before Pesach, everyone wishing you a kosher, spiritual, happy Pesach. And may we all strive to leave our personal Egypt. And may we all strive to leave the garbage of Egypt behind, that we don't have to take any of that baggage and any of that garbage
Amen.
with us. Um,
Yeah.
and the whole point is that Nakshan jumped into the ocean before it split. We need to jump in the fucking ocean because
Yes.
we're there. This is Babylon, this is Egypt, and this is Rome wrapped up. It's like a smoothie of the bad with like horrible whipped cream topping. It's time to talk about this and to remove the shame from it, because these are not things that we chose. These are not things that we can't even really say. We can't even really.
It's not something
It was
that you can be. It's not something you can be ready for. It's
no,
not.
no.
It just comes. It comes. It just shows up out of nowhere.
It
So yeah.
shows up out of nowhere, but we have to be ready to slay the fucking wicked, no matter what.
Yeah.
And a big thank you to JCW. They just posted today that another person was caught distributing child pornography. Thank God he was talking to an undercover cop and not the
Yeah.
real father of a 9-year-old boy. But
Yeah.
what I saw that I thought was so important is that it is shocking, it is alarming, and it is terrifying to see somebody that you know personally on the JCW Walk of Shame. And that happened to me. A friend of
Yeah.
mine has a husband who is on the Walk of Shame. We obviously haven't spoken since that happened.
Yeah. I wrote an article there. Yeah. It's an amazing
Right.
organization.
And this is one of those things that we have to understand, that the research that Mayor Seawald does is maybe only second to the police. And that's even that would be a guess. I've never seen somebody fight this hard the way that Mayor does. And
Yeah.
they are now there's now counseling and support being offered for people who are struggling to accept the news. And
Yeah.
we wish everyone hope and healing. And hopefully everyone can have a great